What's up there, workforce? Chris here.
Brian here.
And today we're going to ask the question, would you go to E3? And we're going to ask it from a couple of different perspectives because I don't think it's that simple of an answer as we get into a world where there are more and more conventions in more and more niche audiences. What is the role of E3? What is the role of a conference? Like, I guess just start there, Brian.
The way I look at this, the role of the conference, like if understanding the history of E3 is that it started out as a press beyond the gaming press industry, etc. Like, how is my mom going to know what's coming out? How is GameStop and all the different stores, Walmart, going to know what they should pre-order because that's what people are going to be excited about and purchase in the fall? Like, if you really think about it, like, there was no real benefit to telling people what was coming out in 5 years because games, like Walmart doesn't care. Like, how many copies of Mario do I need to have on the shelves? So that is what started it out. Obviously, as the internet grew up, the magazines would cover it. And so growing up as a gamer, like, this was this was my Super Bowl. I still classify it as my Super Bowl today. And so it was legendary because it wasn't open to the public. It was an industry thing. You had to be in the media. You had to be a part of, like, any media, really, because they really wanted people, non-IGN and not, this is probably even before IGN was huge, EGM and, all of the different sites, etc. That's how it evolved. Since then, like, PAX, has come out and that's become more the consumer thing. And then just the last couple of years, E3 started letting in anybody. But the big question here, and that's kind of what one of this discussion, like, we're going to touch on a lot of things, everybody, is obviously with streaming and with YouTube, is it still a relevant conference? Does it need to evolve? Because we've seen PlayStation obviously pull out this year, and that's kind of what sparked this. Like, would we go to E3? Chris.
Right. So you naming it your Super Bowl and you talking about what to stock for the shelves are two very apt metaphors. I mean, Super Bowl viewership was down 5% last year, which on a number as big as what Super Bowls draw is enormous. I mean, the NFL is I think they're the highest grossing sports league in the world. I know there's a couple up there. We're starting to talk about billions, so you're starting to talk very, very large events. And then talking about it from a standpoint of, like, what's coming next. When I was a kid, you got like I don't know, I feel like it was like a Sears catalog, and then my parents gave you like a certain number of Post-it notes, and you could put your Post-it notes on the things that you wanted, but you couldn't order them in like what you wanted the most. You could just put your Post-it notes on the number of things, and you were given like a certain number, and your Christmas gifts would come from things you put the Post-it notes on. And so, like, the idea of a conference where they're going to show us all this gameplay and stuff in a time where we had dial-up footage, like we had dial-up internet at the house. Like, it wasn't like I had, hundreds of YouTube videos being pushed to my phone every hour on the hour. It wasn't like I had blogs and I didn't have Twitch streamers and I didn't have access. There weren't all of these game demos being pushed out. And so over the years, I mean, just like print media, how we get our information has changed. And so the role of the conference has had to change with it. So when I was a kid, my dream come true would be to go to BlizzCon or E3. And my parents said E3 seems like more of an adult atmosphere. BlizzCon at the time was still pretty new. That seems like something where it would be more kids. And so my mom told me, if you boys pay your own way, that's your flight, your hotel, your food, your tickets, everything, then one of us parents will accompany you and you can go. And we were not able to secure tickets, which is still a problem people run into today. So that hasn't been fixed. And we only tried, I think, like 1 or 2 years because it was an immense amount of work. I mean, the sheer number of lawns you had to mow to have, I think my mom told us we had to have like $1,000 set aside. I mean, $1,000 for a kid, my allowance was like $5. So, like, just the sheer amount of things I had to do to come
I mean,
up with.
you just went last year. That's how long it took you to save up.
Yeah. I finally got to go in my 30s. I've made it, Mom. My allowance finally added up at $5 every other week to get to go once in my 30s. I think that's part of why I wanted to go to BlizzCon last year, and it's part of the reason that I want you to go this year, is that going once is kind of that very, like, Olympics, just that once in a lifetime thing where, like, the Olympics happen once every 4 years, but you're maybe only going to go once in your life, if ever.
Right.
So it's very much once for you. So But the conferences don't deliver that anymore. Like, when you watch E3, do you see the same number of moments that make you wish, like, oh my God, I was there for that? I got to see that in person.
So it's a complex answer because as you watch, like, I'm just gonna focus in on IGN, like because there's a lot of people from IGN that I follow, right? So as I watch them, and it's like they talk about the first time they go as just this magical experience, and then after that, it's a lot of work. There's lots of information. There's lots of detail. There's lots of writing. There's lots of late nights. There's lots of networking, and they come out just exhausted, right? So when to answer your question, it's that yeah, like I have yet to go. I think I would probably have like a very heightened emotional experience walking around E3. Like it would be this thing because no matter what, like I don't think I've built it up into my mind that it's like it would let me down. I think it would be like if I were to go to Rome and see the Colosseums, or if I would go to Paris and see the Eiffel Tower, or it's like that's how I equate that relationship to where it would be like I can't believe I'm actually here. I've only seen pictures of this because it's independent of the announcements. It's independent of the information because depending on what year you go, you might be getting a new console or you might not, but it's still E3, right? Like going, if we were to go next year, we know we'd probably most likely see whatever Xbox has to offer. And the real kind of kicker of it is if there is an E3 next year, because as everybody has bookmarked this, they're all kind of doing their own things. Will we see, like, is it still relevant? And I look at it on the other side to answer that question is that what I see a lot of right now, being somebody who is asking the question and is not actually at E3 and is a content creator for YouTube, is that I hear a lot of it's kind of shifting into the networking, that E3 is evolving in relation to Twitch and in relation to YouTube. And when we applied to go, they said we had to have 100,000 subscribers to be eligible to go to E3.
Last year they said 50,000, so like it's growing.
So it's growing, and it makes sense because obviously that number is growing higher. So subscribe to the channel if you're new and you're still here. So we can go. But it's that so it's like that. That is something like from a goals perspective and chase perspective, but it's also seemingly that there's a lot of like networking because a lot of the people who are doing the streaming and the YouTube, that's still where they go because the industry still comes together at this time, whether it's labeled under E3, people are bookmarking it as such, right? Because we've got that history. So even if the Super Bowl all of a sudden became, like a week-long extravaganza with all the different football stuff for college and whatever, we'd still think of it as that's that week. That's this when it happens this time every year where all the cool stuff. The devs remove the curtain and say, we've been working on these awesome surprises for you. I hope you were excited. So what same question to you, Chris? Yeah. Like, is it go ahead.
I agree that the focus has shifted. So like I go to the same birthday party in July every year. It falls the first week of July. The guy who's the best man at my wedding, his birthday is right around July 4th. And so we have a big birthday party, but there are people at that birthday party. There is a chance that I only see them maybe one other time throughout the year. And so it's no longer just about his birthday, right? It's become so much more than that. It's this barbecue every year that we have, and he always hosts, and it's a potluck at his house for his birthday. And so that's what I picture E3 becoming. But then it becomes more about who's there. And so I think the focus shifts from, I don't think as a consumer I would want to go as much anymore, but as a YouTuber, it makes me want to go more. So looking back at, like FanFest, it was my first FanFest last time, and I really appreciate you kind of saying, you know what, you'll kind of put together the content schedule. You'll work with other creators on getting us collabs back. We went up to the hotel room. We got a chance to shoot some collabs with people, which was very cool. And I just focused on like taking it in. And I went to more panels than you, and I just had a blast. And so when I look at like something that, as we asked each other questions, one that I know it was both of our first time to go to a media tour or anything like that. Neither of us had ever been to a private event for behind the scenes gameplay. And I can tell you that the first time we just took it in, and then the embargo lifted and people had more videos than us. They had better videos than us. They had more succinct information. They gathered more information. They noticed details that I missed. And I had questions about the gameplay that now I have to wait until the expansion to answer, because I didn't get any footage. And then I asked you and you're like, oh, I don't know. I didn't get that either. And so I can tell you, I can see how it would turn into work, because the first time we went, we're like, oh my gosh, we're going to do so much, all this. But really what it ended up being was we got to fan out, and that was awesome. But like the number of videos we made should have been double that or 3 times that. There's 2 of us. We had 16 hours of trial play between the 2 of us. And so I can tell you, if we're invited back to another media tour for Final Fantasy XIV, we will go at it very differently. We learned a lot. And so I can see how it'll feel like work, and we'll be more tired next time, because next time we're going to have a game plan. I'm going to have a clipboard with all the things that I have to do, and it's going to be different than the list of all the things you have to do. And we're going to just crank through it, because when that event ends, that's the end of it. And so it's the same with E3. So I can see how the first time we would just kind of,
I would be overwhelmed to try to work. I would just be a fan. 100%. Now, the other factor here, outside of like influencing and like the YouTube influence, I don't like the term, but regardless, that's what's generally understood, and Twitch streamers, etc. That we talked about that a little bit, but the other side of this is that as things go digital, there isn't a inventory that people need to stock. There isn't a inventory that I have to pre-order. Some people still like physical copies. That's cool. I respect that. But when you look at everything, especially with the Microsoft conference, where Game Pass, it's like to the point where they should have just said not in Game Pass. It's like they would have announced that once or twice. Like pretty much all their this is gonna be Game Pass. This is gonna be Game Pass. To that point, but when we see that, like the thing that I guess the risk of loss here is the beyond our ecosystem, beyond our echo chamber of gaming into the stratosphere, right? Because E3 was a time where mainstream media, like you would see Forbes, you'd see Washington Post, like all of these these channels and these avenues would pick up on this event because it's a centralized event. It's not like, oh, did you know that something happened in this game, that's kind of small over here? It's like, no, it allows them to say, let's go target this information, and then we can share it out there with the wider community. And I think if E3 were to go away, like something has to kind of build, and kind of keep that in cadence, because we went on this as a story. It was a beautiful story, but it was poorly executed. The Rotary, that Julie's a Rotarian, my dad's a Rotarian. They did this kind of march in Fort Worth, and what all the different clubs, and forgive me, I'm not a Rotarian, so maybe if they're not called clubs, I apologize to all the Rotarians out there. What they decided to do is they do these individualized small marches throughout their different neighborhoods to raise awareness and to hopefully finish off the battle against polio, which they've eradicated it. They've done a lot of really good work. Well, so we did this little march, and you know who reported on it? Nobody. There was no show of force. There was no, hey, there's 100,000 Rotarians are in downtown Fort Worth, and here they are marching and to raise awareness. Awareness was not raised because everybody kind of went off and did their own little tiny thing, and there was nobody cared. It was oh, a group was walking down the street. I wonder why. I've got to get to the store. It's like you don't, but all of a sudden you see 100,000 people. You're like, what is going on? And then the media covers it. It gets on the news. And it actually achieves its goal. And so that just like that is the risk of everybody going independent and spreading out the information over the year, that we end up only feeding our own echo chamber. So Chris.
So I think there is something to be said for communities getting together. I think there's an importance to FanFest and BlizzCon that goes beyond whether or not those games have anything significant to announce, because they are that thing to get together. E3, I feel like, is pushing towards a place for YouTubers, for media, for press outlets to get together, for developers to get together, and get to meet people in their industry. It doesn't seem like it's geared at fans, but that's because the gaming industry as a whole has gotten so big that you do have things that are geared at fans. So PAX seems to be more geared at fans. Gen Con is more geared at fans if you're more into the board gaming and stuff like that. VidCon seems to be geared at connecting with YouTubers very specifically. So this community, FanFest, BlizzCon, things like that, QuakeCon, those are more geared at select groups. And so depending on none of us are just one thing, but depending on the kind of what set of things of yours overlap, there's probably a convention that you should consider going to. But E3 is no longer the pinnacle in my mind. BlizzCon is no longer the pinnacle in my mind. It's a lot more of like, well, what do I play? And my interests have changed. That's part of the problem. We were talking about that right before this went live. Is part of it, the reason E3 may not be as exciting to me anymore is because we really only ask a couple of questions when we say whether or not we're going to make room for a game anymore. And that's basically, can we play it with our friends? Because one night a week we play games with friends pretty consistently. And if not, is it a game that I can put time into that's going to have unlimited support? Because when our lives get busy, we want to know that it's still there when we get back. And we want to continually, and if I do put those hundreds of hours in, I don't want it to end. So MMOs are a really good fit for that, something with continued support. Even if that's like Final Fantasy 15, I know that held your attention for a very long time. It doesn't have to be necessarily MMO, but it does need to be something that's ongoing. So if it's not either of those two things, I don't really know where it fits in. So it's hard for us to get excited about a lot of the things that get announced at E3 because they're not for the two of us.
I think this would be an interesting question to answer, like to kind of look back, like, we filmed this video that if we're able to make it to E3 2020, to be able to sit down and then see if that answer changes, having either the mystery, the allure, like, okay, yeah, we've been, that was cool. Okay, would we go again? Would be like, a good way to look at this. And that's kind of why I was like, man, we should talk about it because we aren't there. Would we want to go? And it's like, there's definitely, and then as it changes, as the industry shifts, and with what, Sony's not showing up this year, will we see them come back next year? It's like, is E3 even going to be around next year? Like, it's always something, that
and
I'm
if it's
kind of
not,
curious
what
about.
does it get replaced with? Because I don't think that void just disappears. There has to be a way for the people at Sony and Microsoft to meet. But there are other big conferences, right? There's still, there's other gaming conferences.
Also around the world, Gamescom in Germany. It's like there are plenty of conferences. Absolutely,
GDC has plenty of people there, right? And GDC,
and that's developer only. So when you think of what's shifted to industry, like that, like the GDC is still like industry professionals, and maybe that ends up becoming what E3 used to be, where it's just for people in the industry. E3 becomes here's the showcase, and here's all the people who are part of that. YouTube and Twitch and Mixer, I'm going to throw them out there for now because Microsoft's obviously investing in it. Good.
We've never considered going into like a VidCon or a PAX or anything like that because I don't really feel that the YouTube gaming community that we're a part of, because even within YouTube gaming, there's very much a subset. So like most of the people that we interact with in our chat and stuff, at least if Google Analytics is to be believed, are over the age of 25.
Yeah.
And so when you look at VidCon, at least from the way that they choose to market it, it looks like it's targeting more of that like Minecraft, non-modded Minecraft, that like younger age group. And so it doesn't really to us feel like something where we would get to meet a lot of you guys. And maybe I'm missing that. Maybe a ton of our community is there, but it feels like I would be more likely to run into at least the community we interact with at Comic-Con in San Diego than I would at VidCon, even though we're YouTubers. And so I guess it really becomes a question of like, how do you find the conference that fits you best? Because these conferences are long. I mean, they're a couple days, they're exhausting, they require airfare, the hotels are booked up. And so by the time you fight in to get to one, odds are maybe you get to go to 2 conventions in a year, and 3. I mean, if you're going to 3 or more, then that is probably a pretty big piece of your life. Like somebody that goes to multiple concerts in a year, that is probably a pretty defining thing in your life, and that's very cool, but that is far from the average person. So like, what would make you want to go to a new convention? If a new convention popped up tomorrow, right? What would make you buy in at the level that like a Fire Festival popped up? Like, what would you so excited that like even in the face of the fact it was going to fail, you would be signed up and you would go?
I don't know how to answer that question, honestly. Like, I can't sit here and say, oh, it would need to have this. It's like, I don't know. Like, because FanFest for Final Fantasy popped up, and I knew I had to go because it was surrounding something that I just deeply care about, which is Final Fantasy. And so it would have to be kind of, in that vein. Like, let's say they decided to do a Phantasy Star online con. Like, totally, I'm there. Like, and there's also like Guardian Con. Like, there's all these other ones that are like usually then surrounding one specific game. So I think that really the answer would be, do I have the time and the money to do so? Do I have the ability to say I'm going to do this? Because at some point, Julie's going to say, why am I not going on a trip and why are you going on this video game thing? It's like, yeah, let's, priorities.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that's a fair question. That's something else that has to be factored. Is I know that even with the Shadowbringers thing, like we went out there and my wife's like, so you're just going to San Francisco? Like I can't go? And like we didn't spend that long in the city. Yeah. Like we bought a couple of peaches and some cherries from a farmer's market while we were waiting on the ride share to pick us up from the tram station because we stayed with a friend that's a couple cities out. And so like we were, as far as experiencing the city, we had one meal and 5 minutes in a farmer's market. Like we could have done more than that here in DFW and still been to things we've never been to. There's plenty of restaurants in Dallas that I guarantee both of us have never been to. I guarantee there's farmers markets in DFW that we've never been to. So like we could have done that without leaving.
Yeah.
But it is hard. How do you balance that with your life is a valid question. I think that what I would want to see more of from E3 is I would like to see more focus on unique gameplay. Just announcing trailers doesn't make sense to me. I do appreciate that there's been this push into announcing like new technologies. So surrounding it, coming out with like a Stadia announcement the same week makes sense to me. Talking about yesterday when we talked about Bethesda, like the Orion thing, like that being something that E3 becomes makes sense to me. It's not nearly as sensational as being a place that announces the next exclusive. But from the last 2 years, like I think that that's where the industry, that's what E3 can become. I just don't know what that price tag commands.
Right. I'm with you.
I don't know.
That's pretty much my thoughts, dude.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we got to talk about this. I'm glad that we got to kind of share this out. What are the things that would drive you guys going to a conference, and let us know from what perspective you're coming from. So if you're into gaming development or if you're a content creator or something like that, does that influence your decision, or is it around, conferences that there's a chance to dress up, or conferences there's a chance just to meet people, or is it something like one of the things that really means something to me in BlizzCon is I get to meet up with people that I've been playing online with for years. So is there something like that where it's just a great chance to and the conference is almost secondary. There were people that I got to hang out with at BlizzCon last year who didn't even get tickets to BlizzCon, and they still went to hang out with us in the evenings. And there was a group of them that got a little house together, like a VRBO, and they played board games there all day while we were at the conference. They just made a whole event out of it, like a little vacation. So like, what is it that draws you guys to a convention, and what is it that you think we would miss if a convention went away, or should just conventions be a way of the past and we should just have
never
Twitch announcements and that's it?
Never. Let's gather together. All right, well, that's those are my thoughts, Chris. I love your questions, and yeah, so let us know in the comments below what you guys are thinking, and we'd love to hear from you. And for Work2Game, my name's Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thanks so much for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Chris.
Does that bother you?
What was that?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I'll snap because I can cut that out. Yay for editing. I was just like, is somebody playing the drums?